Welcome back. A popular Bay Area radio host who has been missing for a week is now presumed dead. The wife of Jeffrey Vandergrift, known on air as JV, posted a statement to Instagram last night. She wrote that her family has discovered information, quote, leading us to believe JV will not be coming back. Vandergrift had openly talked about his struggles with Lyme disease, which he was diagnosed with in 2021. More about the debilitating illness is ABC 7 News contributor Dr. Alok Patel. Dr. Patel, thanks for being here to talk about this. First, can you explain to us how someone might get Lyme disease?
So the overview is basically Lyme disease itself is a bacteria that's transmitted by a tick and can be transmitted to people if you get bitten. So these are black-legged ticks. I know when we see Lyme disease in headlines, we often think about the Northeast, but they are present in every single state except for Hawaii, I believe. And so essentially what happens is the tick bites you. If it bites you and transmits Lyme disease, you can get early symptoms, which is within a few days of getting that initial bite, which could be things like fever, fatigue, joint pain, and kind of a telltale rash that looks like a target sign, but not everyone gets this rash. And then if left untreated, that can progress into more severe illnesses that might include really bad arthritis, heart disease affecting a lot of different organs. It can even cause inflammation of the brain as well, and potentially even longer term or chronic symptoms.
Yeah, and that's why they tell you it's so important after you go hiking or to an area where ticks are known to be to really check your body and check your friend for ticks all over. So important to do that. Going back to JV and hearing about JV has really increased the visibility of some mental health issues. We know he talked openly about brain fog, but it can also cause fatigue, depression, anxiety, even rage. How common are those symptoms with Lyme disease?
With regarding specifically with Lyme disease, and I don't want to editorialize of the tragic case with JV, but with Lyme disease itself, there are reports of people who have these neuropsychiatric symptoms long term. And so the term that people use collectively to describe what happens with Lyme disease, if you have symptoms even after treatment, is this post-treatment Lyme disease, which can include things like depression, anxiety, bipolar, even suicidal thoughts, according to a recent study that came out of Colombia. And the treatment itself is going to vary from individual. Now, Karina, if we look at an overall incidence of Lyme disease in the country, the CDC estimates about 500,000 people per year get Lyme disease. The number could be higher. And of this, surveys report that about 10 to 20% of people may have those longer term symptoms. But I think another important art to this story is that we just have to be much better about providing mental health access and resources to anyone out there who may need it. Whether it's related to Lyme disease or anything out there, we have a mental health epidemic in so many forms taking place.
Right. And talking about Lyme disease, we also know that award-winning author and San Francisco native Amy Tan has also spoken openly about living with Lyme disease. Back in 2014, she was here in the ABC 7 News studio, and here's some of what she shared. Let's listen.
I couldn't write, I couldn't read, I couldn't remember things, and I used to fake it at parties where people were talking to me that I could understand them. That's how bad it got. I had so many different symptoms, and this is the problem, is that people don't know what to treat. They are looking only at one symptom. I had joint problems. I had insomnia, sleep disorder. I had, problems walking. I had so many things wrong that people were looking at different things. They thought I had Addison's or Cushing's. And I had one symptom they could not overlook, which was hypoglycemia at levels of 27, 31. And so that's what made them take it seriously.
So hearing her talk about all those symptoms and that doctors, she said later on in the interview that it took a while for doctors to diagnose Lyme disease. Is it hard to diagnose it?
So it depends. In the early stages, some of these tests we talk about, they may not come back positive. These are the Lyme disease antibody tests. If the test is given too recently, a lot of people don't actually have a memory of getting bitten by a tick either. And if you look at any medical textbook, if you Google Lyme disease right now on Google Images, you will see that target bullseye looking rash. Not everyone gets that rash either. So that's why it's really important for people to not only talk to their doctor if they have any symptoms which make them feel like they're sick, but also if your doctor asks you questions such as, have you been camping recently or hiking or been exposed to any ticks? This is why. But Karina, the other part of this conversation is with regards to these long-term symptoms that might seem kind of insidious. things like long-term brain fog or fatigue or joint pain, where a physician or a healthcare professional may not be able to pinpoint like this could be Lyme disease. And that's why, and it's really great news, that there is more research, there is more awareness coming out regarding not only Lyme disease and preventing it, but also in what we're going to do about post-treatment Lyme disease as well.
And there is treatment?
Regarding post this chronic Lyme disease, it really does depend on the individual. And there is no one-step treatment right now. Regarding Lyme disease in the acute phase, antibiotics will take care of the majority of cases. But again, that requires somebody to be able to go see a physician and get diagnosed with Lyme disease. And it's important for people to know that if you have any suspicion that you may have Lyme disease, early treatment is crucial, not only making sure that you prevent those really bad symptoms, but anything longer in the future.
Okay, so good to know. A lot of important information there. Changing topics real quick before you go, Senator Dianne Feinstein confirmed today that she has shingles and is getting treatment. How serious is shingles for someone in their 90s, and what's the treatment?
When we think about shingles, oftentimes we think about the really painful rash that exists on one side of your body, which on its own can be debilitating. It can be even worse for people who are elderly, people who have weakened immune systems or have underlying medical conditions. Beyond the rash, people can even have brain inflammation and really severe symptoms. The treatment is really going to come down to taking antiviral medication. Depending on when you get treatment, you may be prescribed it, you may not if it's a mild case. But again, one important thing that everyone needs to understand is that if and when you get shingles, those blisters can be contagious, which again is something to keep in mind if you live with other individuals, especially those who are high risk. And prevention is everything. Prevention comes in the form of making sure that people get the Shingrix vaccine if they're above the age of 50 or above the age of 19 and high risk, and making sure that people get the chickenpox vaccine when they're younger.
All right. Great information. Dr. Alok Patel, thank you so much for your time once again.
Thank you.